Hey, hi, and welcome back. I hope that you are enjoying this topic and you are learning something valuable in each and every video. Okay. So in previous video, we completed the preset section, and in this video, I'm going to show you the practical demonstration of 7-segment display section. Okay. And as always, we are going to discuss the testing and troubleshooting technique associated with the 7-segment display section. Okay. So this video is going to be pretty interesting. I'm sure you will definitely enjoy this particular video. Alright, so now let's start with this video. So you already know the learning objective of this particular video. As always, first of all, I'm going to show you the practical demonstration of 7-segment display section. And while doing that, first of all, I will explain you the flow of code, and later we will program that code in the microcontroller, and we will check whether 7-segment display section is working properly or not. Okay. And after that, again, I'm going to discuss the testing and troubleshooting techniques associated with the 7-segment display section. And later in the end, I will discuss the mistakes that you should avoid while dealing with the 7-segment display section. Alright. So that's how basically we are going to cover this video. Now let's start with this point, which is practical demonstration. And in this practical demonstration, let's start with this point, which is program flow. So as soon as system is powered, the controller will start, and after that the next point is write data 0 to 9 on PC2, PC3, PC4, PC5 at a time as per truth table with a delay of 1 second, and execute it in a loop. So what exactly that means? The controller is actually going to display the digits starting from 0 to 9 on the 7-segment display. And for that, controller is actually going to send, or it's going to generate some logics on this PC2, PC3, PC4 and PC5 pin of controller. And we already know that these pins are basically connected to capital A, capital B, capital C and capital D pins of the 7-segment display driver IC, okay, which are basically the input pins of 7-segment display driver. And then the 7-segment display driver is actually going to generate the appropriate logic on the output pins, which are basically small ABCD pins starting from A, B, C, then up to H. So it's going to generate the appropriate logic as per truth table for the respective digit. Okay. And these digits will be displayed on this 7-segment display with a delay of 1 second. And it's going to execute, the controller is going to execute this code in a loop, okay, for the infinite amount of time. So initially 0 will be displayed on the 7-segment display, then 1 will be displayed with a delay of 1 second, then again 2 will be displayed with a delay of 1 second, then 3. So likewise up till 9, and again it will go back to the 0 and it's going to start counting from the 0, okay, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Likewise it's going to display the digits on the 7-segment display infinite amount of times. So that's how simple this particular code is. Now let's program this code in the microcontroller and let me show you the practical demonstration. Alright, so now let's program the code in this controller and let's test this 7-segment display section. Okay. So for that, again, I will go to the Arduino IDE, and this is basically the code that we are going to program in the controller. And again, this particular code is actually very simple, so you can explore this code. Okay. Now let's program the code in the controller. So right now it's compiling. So just wait for a minute. Alright, so it's uploading the code now. Alright, so the code is now programmed in this controller, and you can see, you are able to see the digits on the 7-segment display. So let me check whether it's visible in the camera or not. Alright, so I have switched off the lights. I hope that now they are properly visible. So you can see it's counting from 0, 1, 2, 3, then 4 up to 9 with a delay of 1 second. Okay. So this actually ensures that the 7-segment display section is perfectly fine in our case. Okay. Now let's talk about the testing and troubleshooting of 7-segment display section. Okay. So if the 7-segment display section is not working, then the first thing that you have to check is the polarity of 7-segment display that you have connected here. Okay. So you have to check the polarity of 7-segment display. You have to make sure that the first pin of this 7-segment display is connected to the first pin on the PCB. So we have actually given this marking here, and this marking actually indicates that this is basically the first pin on the PCB, and you have to make sure that you are connecting the 7-segment display in the right orientation. Now let's consider that the 7-segment display is connected properly, but still the 7-segment display or the digits are actually not displaying or on the 7-segment display. So what could be the reason? So let's discuss that now. So if the 7-segment display is not displaying the digits, then you have to check the controller part first, okay? So you have to check whether the controller is generating the appropriate signal corresponding to the respective digit or not. So once you verify that, then you have to go to this 7-segment display driver IC. And you have to check these pins, okay? You have to check the voltage on these pins. You have to check whether the voltage which is generated by this controller, the same voltage, the same logic is actually reaching on the input pins of the this 7-segment display driver. So with the help of multimeter, again, you have to check each and every pin, and you have to check on these points, okay? You have to check on the terminals. You don't have to check on the PCB. And this will actually ensure that at least the signal are actually reaching to this 7-segment display driver IC. And if the signal are not reaching, then what you can do, you can actually press this IC. So sometimes what happens, because of loose contact, it might happen that the terminals of this IC will not be connected to the pads on the PCB. So you have to make sure that the IC is properly inserted in this IC base, and once you press the IC, that will make the contact, and you will get the signals on the input pins, which are ABCD pins of the 7-segment display driver IC, okay? So once you are sure that you are getting the voltage on the input side, then you have to go to the output side, and you have to check whether you're getting the appropriate voltage on the ABCD, small ABCD, EFGH pin of the 7-segment display driver IC. Now, if you are not getting the appropriate voltage, or if the voltage is not produced by this particular IC, it means that you have to check the power pin of this IC, okay? So you have to check the power pin, and you have to check whether the 5 volt is available on the power pin or not. If the 5 volt is available on the power pin and still this IC is not generating the appropriate logic corresponding to the digit, it means what? It means that there is a problem with this particular IC, and it's time to replace this IC with the new IC, okay? So that's basically that's how basically you have to test and troubleshoot the 7-segment display section, okay? And again, one more thing that I want to tell you here is, it might also happen that you may insert this IC in the wrong direction, okay? So here, basically this is basically the notch of this IC, and again there will be notch on the IC base, okay? So on IC base also there will be notch. So you have to match the notch of the IC with the notch of the IC base, and then only you have to insert the IC in the IC base. So if the 7-segment display is not working, then again you have to check whether the IC is properly inserted or not. And another problems will be related to the soldering. So always you have to check whether the 7-segment display is soldered properly or not, whether the IC base is properly soldered or not, okay? So these things you have to check. And if you follow this testing and troubleshooting method for 7-segment display, then definitely you will get the problem, or you'll be able to reach to the point where the issue is, okay? So I hope that this testing and troubleshooting method will help you to troubleshoot the 7-segment display section when you will use in your project or product, okay? Now let me discuss the mistakes that you should avoid when you are dealing with the 7-segment display section, okay? So the first mistake that you should avoid is, as I already discussed, the first mistake is actually related to the insertion of IC. So you have to make sure that you have inserted the IC in the right orientation. As I told, you have to match the notch of this IC with the notch of IC base, and this is basically the first mistake that you should avoid. Then the second mistake is, it might also happen, while soldering this IC base, it might happen that the IC base itself is soldered in wrong orientation, okay? So also you have to check, while you have to be conscious while soldering the IC base on the PCB, because once you solder the IC base in wrong orientation, then removing this IC base from the PCB is going to be very difficult. Even if you are until and unless you have a hot air gun, it will be very difficult to remove the IC base from the PCB. So always you have to make sure that while soldering the IC base on the PCB, you have to make sure that you are soldering it in right orientation. Okay, that's why we actually provide the silk screen on the PCB, so that you can insert the IC base on the PCB in the right orientation. Okay, and on the silk screen there will be always notch for the through-hole component. Okay, through-hole IC. So that's basically the second point, which is related to the orientation of IC base. Then the third point is actually related to this 7-segment display. As I already discussed, you have to make sure that the orientation of the 7-segment display is proper. If you solder the 7-segment display in wrong orientation, then removing the 7-segment display from the PCB is going to be very difficult. You may definitely you will damage the PCB, or you will damage the 7-segment display, because you can't remove the 7-segment display without the help of hot air gun. So you have to be conscious when you are soldering the 7-segment display. You have to check the pin number 1, which is the pin number 1 in the data sheet of 7-segment display, and also you have to match the pin number 1 of 7-segment display with the pin number 1 on the footprint. Okay, so that was basically the third point. Then the fourth point is, for example, let's say that there is a problem with this 7-segment display, and now you have to replace the 7-segment display. So when you will solder the new 7-segment display on the PCB, always make sure that you check the 7-segment display first, and then only you have to solder it on the PCB. Otherwise, it might happen that the new 7-segment display that you are going to solder on the PCB, it might happen that it is damaged. Okay, so unnecessarily it's going to it's going to give you a lot of pain. So before soldering the new 7-segment display on the PCB, you have to check the 7-segment display externally, and then only you have to solder it on the PCB. Now I will show you how to check the 7-segment display with the help of multimeter. So again, you have to put the multimeter in continuity mode, and you have to check the 7-segment display. Alright, so now let me remove the power, and let's test how exactly and let me show you how we need to check whether the 7-segment display is working properly or not. Okay, alright, so this is basically the 7-segment display, which you already know, and it's going to have the pins like this on the bottom side. So you have to put your multimeter in the continuity mode. So I have placed the multimeter knob in the continuity mode, and let's check whether this 7-segment display is properly working or not. So we have already discussed the pin configuration of 7-segment display, and we saw that the center pin of this 7-segment display is going to be the common pin, or it's going to be the ground pin. Okay, so you have to connect the negative terminal of the multimeter to this center pin in order to test the different LEDs which are present on this 7-segment display. Okay, so the same thing I am going to do now. So let me flip this 7-segment display. So I'm going to connect the negative terminal to the first to the center pin, and later I'm going to check one pin one by one. Okay, each LED one by one. So I will just hold it like this, and let me switch off the lights. Alright, now let's observe whether all the LEDs are working perfectly fine or not. So let's check the first LED. So you can see it's glowing, it means that it's working. Then the second LED, you can see it's working. Then the third one, and then the last one. So this part, these all 4 LEDs are actually working. So now let me swap the position. So I'm going to check this side now. So again, I'm going to check this one, and then the second LED is working, and then the third LED is working, and the last one is going to be this point, a decimal point. So you can see all the LEDs are working. So this way you have to check the 7-segment display before you place it on the PCB. Okay, so I hope that it's clear now. Alright, so that's what I wanted to tell in this video. I hope that every single thing that we discussed regarding this 7-segment display section is now clear to you. And if you still have any kind of doubt related to any part of this 7-segment display section, then definitely you can ask me and I will help you with that. Okay, alright, so that's what I wanted to tell in this video. Now I will see you in the next video, which is about testing motor driver section. Okay, so I will see you in the next video now.